Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's been a really long time since I've posted. I do apologize for that. As many of you will know, I have a young baby in the house. That's one of 3 children, and it's just been really tough to find time to commit to bringing content to the channel. This particular video today is actually based on a question I got sent on Facebook, and it centers around Jodan, and it's a player who's in their early to mid 50s, around 53. They've been practicing for 10 years and use Jodan. The person holds a rank of Sandan. So obviously good solid basics and that sort of thing in place. But they're finding that against younger, faster opponents in particular, they're just getting struck on the leading Kote way too often. So I think maybe they were just sort of stuck in a bit of a rut, looking for a bit of advice. So look, I'm going to share what I've learned so far and things that have helped me, but I've got to caveat all this by saying I'm not a high level Jodan practitioner by any stretch of the imagination. So don't consider me the gospel or an authority on the topic. Obviously what your sensei says goes, or any particular high grades, sort of 6th dan above, that kind of thing. If they tell you something different from what I say, you go with that first, because they're probably onto something deeper than I can offer you. That being said, there are things that I've come across in my practice, and I have come across this problem, and there's things I've learned and things I'm working on, and that I'm getting benefit from by doing so, that I can pass on to you. I had a very similar experience. Usually when I'm practicing against Jodan, I'm practicing mostly against people who don't have a whole heap of experience against Jodan. And around this time last year, I visited some friends in Ireland, and there's a chap who serves on their national team, and he was keen to have Keiko with me because he very seldom gets to practice against Jodan, but he's national squad level practitioner, Jodan. He was Jodan at the last time I checked. Fantastic player, really fast, really dynamic. A couple of years younger than me, but not too much, so he's got that real nice balance of like really high level experience. But he's still young enough to be really explosive with his Kendo. And I had a very similar experience where he kind of kept picking me off on the Kote. So a lot of his advice centered around footwork. Okay, so we're gonna work our way from the ground up. So in all likelihood, it probably is footwork and control of distance. So we'll talk a little bit about that and some things you can do, because obviously if you are older, I don't know what your physical state is, are there injuries in play, long-term issues, cartilage, ligament damage, who knows. I just don't know. So we'll go through a range of issues and we'll work our way from the bottom to the top. So we'll talk about distance, talk a bit about control of center, and for me, what I think is the most appropriate thing, or the best thing to unlock, which is to develop this man strike. This person says they practice to develop this man strike, and they'll continue to do so, but they're not necessarily finding a way with it. That could be part of the problem, and my guess is it's probably a number of things stacked together that are not, no one of them is like poor, but a marked improvement in each of them will probably bring you what you're looking for, and should open up some opportunities. Before we jump into it, the audio from the dojo, it's quite echoey in there, so I don't want to chop and change back and forth, so I'm going to say this now rather than interjecting later. But when we get to the sort of control of center, it's important just to remember that obviously Jodan players play with the left fist slightly forward, right, in Hidari Jodan. So I'm assuming you don't take Migi Jodan, which is like Chudan with the sword straight up above your head, like Ippome. But if it's Hidari Jodan, left fist leading, it's important to understand what the Kamae is doing you know, obviously your head is guarded when you're in Kamae. Your left fist is forward, okay, and that's an important thing to acknowledge, because you're essentially baiting the Jodan player in particular, but anyone really. You're using your Kote basically as bait, right? You have it out there so that you can bring the strike to bear quite quickly, but that's not the only reason. You can also seme with it and use it tactically to try to get them to strike Kote when you want them to. So when I get to the portion where I start talking about control of center and a little bit about seme, please bear this baiting, this use of the Kote to try to seme forward and attract them to cut Kote, right? You want to give them the hope that they can take debana Kote. If you can get them playing like that, actually it should favor the Jodan player, and this is why the menwaza in particular is so important to develop. The last point I want to mention about that before we jump into the dojo footage, which is very informal. We just shot it really quickly after training because I had a Mortadachi available for 20-30 minutes of his time late at night, so I wasn't going to press him to try to get take after take after take to get everything to look perfect. Okay, so it is informal, there's little mistakes made and things like that, but you should be able to get the point from it, get the gist. But there is this dynamic between the Jodan player and the Jodan player, where the Jodan player will try to seme round sometimes, so they'll circle around to what would be their right to get their kisaki to the outside of your kote so that it's poised to strike in on that line. And the Jodan player typically semes round to their left to try to negate that. Not always. Sometimes it's good to step the other way to trick them up, and the Jodan player vice versa, the same thing applies. Since when the Jodan player semes the other way, it's actually quite awkward for the Jodan player to move that way. There's a great video, and I'll link that in the description, where Alex Bennett Sensei Kyoshi Nanadan explains a little bit about this dynamic and some interesting ways for the Jodan player to throw a curveball at the Jodan player. But it's useful advice for the Jodan player to study as well. So I'll link that in the description. You can check that out after this video. But it's important to remember, there is this rotational factor. Some players use it, some players don't. It could factor in as to one of the reasons why you're getting struck so often on the Kote. But I've got to be honest, because it's such standard practice, it's such a common strategy, that I'd be surprised if you haven't come across it before. If you haven't, check it out. But chances are you probably have. I'm going to assume that you probably have, because it is quite common to find online people talking about that. So I've got, my suspicion is that it's a combination of factors and probably not so much related to that. I think it boils down to more kind of fundamental basics, okay? But I am going to try and bear in mind the age factor that you've mentioned, and the fact that you don't think your body is as fast as it used to be, and we have to consider that. You can't fence like you're 20 when you're 55. That's important for us to acknowledge. Myself, I'm 40. I'm not quite there yet. I do still have some good physicality to my Kendo, but I'm definitely not as fast as I used to be as well. I am noticing some changes now. I've been stubborn to go off the cliff, but it is starting to happen. Anyway, so let's get stuck into the video. Remember the rotational thing, because it can figure into this, but I don't think it's the main point. I think it comes down to the collection of these three other aspects, which is control the distance, control the center line, develop this men strike. Those are key. And then the rest of it, I mean, this is all just standard fare for Jodan as well, which is, you want to take the initiative. So when you do strike, when you do seme in and you're leading with this Kote to make them pop a Kote, you want to dictate the timing of that. Okay, so when we get to that portion of the video, remember that it's important that when you close the distance to make your seme, you should be calling the shots, and you should be committed to strike at that point. And if there's any kind of delay or hesitation, it's probably a trap, and you may want to step back. Okay, right, so without any further ado, let's get into the video, and hopefully it helps. So we'll start off with footwork and distance. So, yeah, fast. So the first thing is to start off with a good healthy distance for Jodan, and it's probably longer than you might think. So it could be that you're fencing from too close. So we take Sonkyo, a tall bar. From here, if we just step in by crossing over our feet, don't use the extra hiketsuke. Okay? So you want to advance, we're told not to retreat. So you want to step forward. But this might, if we bring it back down to Shino without moving our feet, it should just be about that tip-to-tip distance for Kote. Okay? Resist the temptation to try to fight from here. Okay? So from there, if you're using this distance and you're still getting struck, okay, because they're faster, what's probably happening is when you make the semi, they're striking, they're actually reacting to your step in. You're not prepared to do something as soon as you make that step in. You should either strike or get out of it. So the first thing is control the distance. Okay? So we come into this distance. If I step in, I'm not ready to cut. I must move my feet. I must move swiftly back. And I must be prepared to do that for more than one step. So, okay. So that's, if we need to retreat, then you've got to retreat, okay? It's not ideal, but you've got to control the distance. That's the basics of Kendo still apply for Jodan. You've got to control the distance and make sure that if you do retreat, don't break your posture, okay? So, from here, I say I'm not ready. Try not to fidget and twist, but you've got to move. Okay? You can do the Nuki Waza. Or the Monty with the Nuki Waza. Another thing that you can do, if your semi has failed and you're not ready to strike, is you can advance into them. That's another concept. Okay? But just remember that if you're going to advance into them, you need to control the center line as you do so. So I'm sitting there, I'm not ready. Now basically move into Jodan, into Super Saiyan, like a close Jodan position. Okay? So go semi, not ready, control the center. So don't just step in. Don't just step out, but step in or step out with a view to control the center. And be prepared to move more than once. Okay? So that is the basics on the controlling the distance. So from here, what if I'm not very mobile? My legs are just not as fast as they used to be, and they're just faster, they can cover a larger distance, they've got a bigger stride, and they just seem to be able to hit whenever they want to hit. Okay, so now my motodachi is going to harass my kote, okay, and I'll get struck sometimes practicing this, but what you can use, don't use it too often, and try to use it with an idea of trying to make a strike if you can, but you can use the Ichio Toshi type movement. Okay, so I've been doing Keiko for a while, and I keep getting hit on the kote whenever he wants. Okay, so try again. So I just can't make no time. So what can I do? Use your close. There you go. Okay. Now I don't want to do this as a habit because it becomes overly defensive and I'm not making an opportunity, I'm not making something out of it. But what it can do is it can strongly discourage them from attacking when there is no opportunity. Ideally, he should be striking the kote if I bring it forward, or if he centers towards it and I lift it. These are his ideal opportunities to strike. So for him, that's what he should be aiming for. He shouldn't just be striking it for no reason. So if you've got somebody who's just striking it for no reason, you can break up the rhythm using this Uchiyotoshi type method. You can also, if they're not coming forward, but they're kind of reaching to strike without using their footwork, so this, Rentoku waza. Kind of the feeling of Kote. And many people don't practice the two-step waza for Jodan. So try to strengthen the waza, it gives you more options, okay? So now we talked about control the distance. We talked about control the center line, okay? You can use a uchotosh, you can use the closing, at the center. Now let's talk about the mechanics of the main strike, because this is your biggest weapon against the Kote. Ideally what you want to do, you want to use your Kote as bait, okay? So when you send they must strike on this line, they have something to work. Okay? This means they are off the center line. That gives you an opportunity to be on the center line. So for Jodan, when we normally cut, for a large cut, we come forward in this big arc. So the left hand comes up, and it comes down very definitely, but it's very extended already. For Jodan, we want to bring the left hand to the ago, straight towards the ago. Okay, so here. Because of that, it means that our left fist, as the movement starts, is coming down the center, as their cut is going out of the center. So we can use this to our advantage. But in order to do so, we must take the sen. We must be the person who starts the waza. So we must use semen. So if we use our distance, and we pick our time in, bit of connection, semen, should be able to cut straight down the center, and it works a little bit like a nuki waza. So as that cut comes in, my kote gets taken away at the same time. And because I have the distance advantage, because I'm using a one-handed waza, I should be able to hit their man without the kote being at much risk. But if I wait, if I step in and wait for them to attack, it won't work. Okay? So if I do my semi and nothing happens, then I've lost the waza. So it's got to be that I semi, and the moment I perceive that they have committed to strike, I must unleash my strike. Connection, semi. Connection, semi. One more time. So the trajectory of the cut is really important. Control the distance, take the initiative, and make sure that your men strike, you don't hesitate, but it goes straight down the middle towards the ago to take an efficient route. The last point then, on making the men more efficient, is try not to think of it as just a single-handed technique, where you just swing with the left. This is good for training, to develop the strength, but you should involve the right hand. So a good friend of mine, who also practices Jodan, got the advice from Kamae sensei, who's Kyoshi Naradan, to use your right hand. So as the left hand, as you're pushing and driving the cut forward, the right hand also throws the cut as it comes down to the door. When you combine this with Chiba sensei's advice to snap and open hips, the cut becomes quite snappy. And as the hips open, your reach increases. Okay, so you gain distance by moving into a slightly hanmi position as you cut. But to initially accelerate the step forward, the right hand comes with momentarily. Okay, so we're going to use that in combination with using the left hand straight to the ago, the opponent's ago, and that should make the strike snappy, strong, fast, and big. So yeah! Yeah! One more time. Yeah! Once your opponent takes the threat of men seriously, they will start to lay off your kote a bit, and they will have to diversify their strategy. they'll have to start thinking about using suriage or threatening your ski. And then once they do this, so once if I can stay with the hand and they lift to do the suriage, I can practice my murote kote, two-handed kote. If they choose to keep their kamae and not lift, and they do very little at all, and we can send it, and all he does is he protects, well, I can practice my kata de kote. Okay? And then, if he decides that he's going to ski, then this is also great because now I get a really good practice where they're threatening the ski and the kote, and this is how it should be against Jodan. And then if he does the ski, then it'll teach me to go forward, even though there's a strong control over the center, the way the Jodan player should have it. And once you reach that position, you're doing a nice natural keiko. So hopefully this is what you can achieve. But in order to do it, you must make sure that your men, your katate men, becomes a very serious threat. Once they take that threat seriously, then you can do fuller practice of Jodan. But to do that, you've got to remember those basics. It's the same as Jodan. Control the line, don't get too close, or it's Christmas for them, and they can strike whenever they want. So control the line, control the center, so they can't strike whenever they want. And then build a strong and efficient devaname. I hope this helps. This is just my experience so far. I'm not an expert, but it's what's worked for me and what's helped me so far in my practice of Jodan. So I hope it can help you. Thank you to my Matsudachi for his help, for staying after Keiko. It's late at night. Let's go home. Bye.